3, 2, 1.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for checking this out. As promised a few weeks ago on the audio-only podcast, we are venturing into video, and I will try to make these a little shorter because I know you people are very, very, very busy. And to check this out, and yes, I'm still learning how to do this. So if you see me looking around and wondering what's going on, it's me trying to make sure I'm doing everything right. Okay. But here we are, we're out here and doing everything that we need to be doing. I hope to provide something for you that is interesting, that is informative. And that's what we're going to look at today. We were invited to a church recently that we had never attended before. Some Amish friends of ours, they wanted to invite us. They were having a very special speaker. And so we went, and yes, it was interesting. It was interesting. Not quite what I expected, but it was close. Okay. The speaker that they had reminded me of something that I had come across in some research years ago when I was writing the books. And I thought about that, and years ago, it just didn't click to verify it at the time, so I didn't. And after I heard him the other week, I wanted to look into it a little deeper. And as I was looking into it a little deeper, I noticed other people had obviously been looking into it as well because it was on some of their comments on some various social media posts. So I thought, okay, I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to talk about it now. Hopefully I can speak of it intelligently and it comes across the way I want it to come across, because I need to be able to have you, and this is much easier for me. I've been used to doing audio, so doing video is a little odd for me. But I want to get this to you in such a way that it makes sense and is easily understandable, I hope. Now, many of us are taught very early in our Christian lives that the early Christian church used either a fish or a cross as a symbol of their faith. They said, okay, if we use this fish, if we use a cross, people will know that we are following Yeshua, we're following Jesus. And there are some, but not a great deal, of fish and cross symbols that we've come across in history. They were following this way, as Paul writes. But there's a more prolific symbol that was used in the very early church, in that church history, 1st, 2nd century era. Maybe I should have said era. And that is the symbol of an anchor. Okay, the anchor actually comes from Hebrews 6, verses 19 and 20. And forgive me for looking over here because that's where I have my notes written down. Hebrews 6, 19 and 20 read, "We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain where Yeshua, Jesus, our forerunner, has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, or the Melchizedek." The anchor, as a symbol, is actually found in 1st century cemeteries. St. Domitia in Rome, and engravings are also found in St. Priscilla Cemetery, in those catacombs. They're there. They're carved into stone. We see them, and far more anchors, apparently, from the research I've done, than there are crosses or fish. Now, if you've ever been on a boat and you've ever used an anchor, you know what it's for, right? It holds the boat where it needs to be. That's kind of makes sense, right? Now, early sailors and apparently the early Christians, they looked at the symbol of an anchor as something to keep you safe. When I was young, there were a lot of World War II era sailors that I knew. Many of them had just an anchor tattooed on an arm. And it was, yes, it showed that they were in the Navy, but the anchor was a symbol of safety and security. And the anchor is also a symbol of hope. And you might be saying, well, why is it important that we know that the early church used this? Well, for a couple of reasons, really. The old saying, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. Well, sometimes when you know history, you're going to repeat it anyway because it worked. But that's not what I want to talk about, right? I'm not suggesting we go back to an anchor as a symbol. I'm saying we need to remember it, right? Because there's some kind of wild ideas out there as to why they chose an anchor. One of those ideas is, well, they chose this anchor because it reminded them of the cross. You see, the Romans had kind of caught on to the fish. They kind of caught on to the cross, and they were persecuting Christians. They didn't like what was happening, and neither did the Pharisees and Sadducees at the time either. However, the idea that the shape of an anchor reminds you of a cross is kind of far-fetched for me, and I think it was for them as well. There's another reason they throw this out there. No pun intended there. And that is when we read Mark 4:1, apparently Yeshua, Jesus, walked out and got in a boat to speak to the crowd. And they say, well, the boat must have been anchored. I would rather speculate it was probably tied up to shore in some way. You could say it was anchored to shore, but you know what I mean, right? I think it's a little far-fetched too. We need to remember when Paul was going to, visit places, when he was on his journeys, the first places that he would go were to the Jewish synagogues. He would go to the Jewish communities. Now, the Jewish communities, the Jewish people at that time, never would have accepted a cross as a symbol to associate themselves with. They weren't going to identify with that. The cross, for them, was a torture device. Tens of thousands of Jewish people were killed by the Romans by being crucified on crosses. Josephus reminds us, that there were so many at one point who were crucified, they ran out of crosses. That's how many there were. So for the early Jewish people to attempt to identify with a cross would have been less than profitable for Paul, right? It would have been kind of like the Jewish people today. They're offended by the swastika because, in the German army under Hitler, it was their symbol, and that killed, about 6 million people. So if you're offended by the swastika, as many of us are, especially the Nazi swastika, and you're Jewish, you would probably be offended by a cross as well. And I need to be careful how I say this. If you are a Christian person and you're thinking about reaching out to the Jewish community, be very, very careful that you don't offend them first. Leave the cross at home, okay? It's offensive for them. If you want to make friends, if you want to, and I don't want to say you need to proselytize to them. They already know who our Creator is. They already know who Yeshua is. They know. Don't offend them further when you're talking to them, okay? You can have those conversations. I guarantee they'll be more productive if you leave the cross at home. Just saying. The anchor is a tool, right? You throw out the anchor, it holds the boat in place. Mariners still use it today to keep their boats in places. It doesn't matter how small the boat is or how large the ship is. When you drop anchor, you're going to stay there. It's going to hook into the bottom. It's going to hook into something. It's going to hold you steady. And that's, why it says we anchor, our hope is an anchor. It holds us fast to promises that God has made to us. I need to address this, and I need to be careful how I do it. There's a lot of accusations being thrown around in the Christian, Jewish, Messianic communities today. And it has to do with symbols and how many of the symbols that are being used probably come from pagan sources. And why would you use these pagan symbols to identify yourself with those? Well, the reality is, and let's face it, it doesn't matter what you could draw, what computer program you might come up with that could fabricate something. Chances are, with 4,000 years of history behind us, at some point in time, some pagan culture would have already used something similar to that. Okay? And I know you're going to hear, well, that isn't what it means to me. That's not what that means to me. Well, it doesn't matter so much what it means to us. It matters what it means to our Creator, right? And if you remember Exodus 20, verse 4, you do not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below, or in the waters beneath. Don't make an idol out of anything. And I know a lot of people who have taken the fish, they've taken the cross, they've taken other things, they've made idols out of them. Instead of just being a symbol, they've crossed the line. So we need to be aware of that. It's okay to use symbols to communicate, right? It's okay. Have you gotten a text message lately? There's chances are that in that text message, you've had emojis. These are symbols to communicate. It's okay to do that if you keep it in context. And I need to make sure you're aware that what I'm not saying is that we shouldn't do that. I'm saying we need to be aware when we do it what these things mean. We need to be aware of actual and factual history, whatever it might be, but especially in the faith that we practice, right? If you want to communicate using a symbol, you and the person you're communicating with needs to know what the symbol means, right? So knowing history can keep us where we belong, especially if we realize that the anchor was used as a symbol of hope. Because when you throw that anchor out on the words of our Creator, it's going to keep you where you need to be. The biggest reason we need to understand that is every promise that our Creator has made throughout history, He will keep. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but He will in the future keep every promise that He has made. That's why it's so important to not only know history, to talk about it. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be, this world-renowned historian. You just simply need to be aware. You need to be aware of your history. And another reason, very quickly, when we're aware of our history, it can also protect us from, the traditions that we might practice that don't conform with our faith or shouldn't conform with our faith. It protects us from the legends, because we know legends come, that somebody does something and the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like the fish that I caught was this big, and then all of a sudden it's this big, right? Understanding, knowing history protects us. Throwing out an anchor, our anchor of hope, onto the Word of God protects us. It helps us live the way we're designed to live by our Creator. And that's what we're after. We want to live in such a way that he is pleased and glorified. I hope you have enjoyed that. It was informative for me to put it together. I need to remind everyone very, very quickly that the books are available at authorjerrymitchell.com, Tradition to Truth, God's Universe, God's Rules, and Inheriting Lies. They are there, hopefully, to make sure that you become more informed. Because I do, challenge the way we practice our faith. Your faith in itself is very personal to you. That's something you need to work out. But the way we practice that is something each of us need to challenge every day. Are we getting it right? I truly, truly hope that this has been informative for you. And until next time, I do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.